How are you?
Hi, I'm good, Tom. Nice to meet you over the airwaves.
It's nice to meet you as well. I have to say, I've been fortunate enough in doing this job, to have read a lot of, memoirs and books about actors' lives. I can't think of one that begins with sort of a play-by-play retelling of a pilot episode to kick off the book.
Yeah.
Tell,
Yeah.
tell, it starts off with the beginning of The Good Wife. That's the beginning of the book. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about why you made that choice.
Um, Interestingly enough, I didn't have a prologue to the book, and the book was basically done. And my editor said, I feel like we need a prologue. Um, do you have anything you could think of that could start off the book? And I had already written the prologue um, probably 2 years before that and put it in a file, like save for a rainy day kind of thing. And I said, actually, I have one right here. Let me rewrite it a little bit and make it a little cleaner and edit it down. And I sent it to her and she said, you just happen to have that? And I said, yeah, that scene it's always haunted me. And I had to really dig deep to figure out why I, um, why I was so completely taken by Alicia Florrick, and what was it in that moment in the pilot where she felt so lost that I related to so strongly. And so it felt like a perfect launching pad for the book.
What did you feel then when you reread that?
I have a very difficult time even watching that scene.
Why?
Writing it was actually fun because when you're writing, you're sort of looking at it objectively and being able to take yourself a little bit out of the character. Playing it was much harder, but I felt a real sense of loss and a real sense of what started me on this whole journey of acting to begin with was the idea that I never felt like I was in the right country or the right clothing or the right home. I always was traveling from country to country, from parent to parent, and never felt like I fit in anywhere. And when Alicia walks down that hallway to an unknown future where she thought she had all her ducks in a row and her world blows up, it really mirrored that feeling of absolute isolation and no control. What do you do now?
In addition to, as you mentioned, the very personal moments in this book, there are some really wonderful stories of acting and your really incredible career. I was hoping you might be able to tell one of them for us, which is that you almost turned down ER for
Uh,
you almost didn't end up on ER.
right. Well, I wasn't supposed to. I wasn't supposed to end up on ER. I was hired to do the pilot as a guest star who died.
Yeah.
My character died in the pilot and came in on a gurney, overdosed. Um, but the way the director, Rod Holcomb, shot that scene of me coming in on that gurney, he shot it with the Steadicam. So I always said on ER, I always felt like the Steadicam was the seventh character on that show because you're seeing all these characters through the eyes of this camera that's moving with a person, right? So it suddenly, whoever that camera's following, they get elevated to a different status almost because you're seeing when I came in on the gurney, you're seeing through George Clooney's eyes, through Dr. Ross's eyes, what it means to him that I came in on a gurney OD'd. Suddenly, my character became much more important. In a 2 hour pilot, I think I had 7 minutes of screen time. That was it. Um, and I came back to New York when I finished the pilot. I had had a great time with everybody, and I needed a job. I was broke, and I needed a job, and I got offered a job to go and do Homicide: Life on the Street, which was being shot in Baltimore. And I had to make that decision when the phone rang, and it was George Clooney saying, "I think they want to keep you alive. Don't take another job." And I said, "You think? How are they going to do that?" I came in OD'd on the pilot. And he said, well, your character tested really high. Our characters together tested really high, and the audience did not want you to die. So I think they're going to rewrite the end. And so I took a gamble on George Clooney's words, and I turned the other job down and waited. And a week later, they flew me out to LA, and I started my ER career.
It's amazing how your entire life can change on one little moment like that. On one, like, not just one decision, like the one gamble you said you had to make, but just one phone call.
Yeah. And that had he not called then, I would have taken the other job.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to do ER. So it's also that, the way the stars align and timing. I mean, I say that about every job I've ever had. I always feel like it's timing. It's just, originally my book was called A Left Instead of a Right, because it's something my grandfather always used to say to me: you never know how your day is going to go. If you take a left instead of a right, you might bump into the man you're going to marry, or an old friend from school, or whatever. And I always felt like my career sort of went in the back door instead of the front door. How I ended up getting my career on track was always seemed to be through not the normal process. So when my character, when they decided I was going to live, I couldn't do any of the publicity with the rest of the cast because it was a surprise, because in the pilot,
right,
they showed. So I sort of was always on the outskirts waiting to get in to be a part of this incredible cast, but I wasn't allowed to be seen until the second show had aired, which showed that I lived. So there was always these, same with The Good Wife. I mean, The Good Wife was offered to two other actresses, and the only reason I got it was because they turned it down. And I remember saying to my agent, well, I kind of feel like sloppy seconds. This doesn't feel good, And she said such a great thing to me. She said, when you're on screen as Alicia Florrick, no one's going to see anything but you playing Alicia Florrick. And she said, get over it. And I was like, you're right. You're absolutely right. And it was a great lesson, because obviously no one else knows the other two actresses were offered it. But for me at the moment, it felt like, so again, not through the front door, I was through the back door. And it just felt like that's been my trajectory in my career, is that I managed to somehow make it, but I never actually get on the express train.
Speaking of The Good Wife, take a listen to this.
Your Honor, if you compel my witness to answer this question, I am moving for an immediate mistrial.
Denied. I'm asking a simple question.
You are not, sir.
Mrs. Florrick.
You are piercing the Fifth Amendment right.
Mrs. Florrick, shut up.
No, sir.
Excuse me?
As long as you are attempting to circumvent her Fifth Amendment right, I will not shut up.
You will shut up or be held in contempt.
Then hold me in contempt, and I will refer this to the Judicial Conduct Committee for immediate action.
That's a clip from The Good Wife, starring my guest Julianna Margulies as attorney Alicia Florrick, who you just heard there. Julianna's here to talk a little bit about her new book, Sunshine Girl. So, what was your first impressions of Alicia when you first finally got to read and see her?
Yeah. So I don't know if this was news in Canada, probably not. But it was a big New York story when it came out, was that Elliot Spitzer had all these affairs with these prostitutes. And there was a big
He was the governor of New York, right?
Of New York.
Yeah, right. I recall this now, yeah.
And was he a governor or a senator?
I think
he was governor.
He was governor, yeah.
He was governor. And his wife, Silda Spitzer, who in her own right was a lawyer and an incredibly smart, successful woman, was standing behind him at the press conference when he was announcing his resignation. And she was standing behind him. And I'll never forget watching her and thinking, why are you, I was screaming at the television, why are you there? You could see her face. She just wanted to disappear. She wanted a sinkhole to happen, get off that stage. And I remember thinking, what happens in the green room when they get off that stage? Like, what is that relationship now? Cut to I get the script of The Good Wife, and it has that exact scene written. And I'm riveted from the minute I read them walking into the press conference. And I called the Kings, and Robert and Michelle King, who wrote the show, and I said, this is fascinating, and it's everything I thought when I was watching the Spitzer press conference. And they said all we could think about after that press conference was what happened in the green room afterwards. What do you even say to each other? How do you even respond to one another? So the second I read it, I knew I wanted to play her. I found her to be absolutely fascinating because she had put herself on the back burner for him and for his career, even though she graduated top of her class at Georgetown. She graduated above him and the Josh Charles character. And yet she was the one at home with the kids. And I just thought if there was ever a time for a story like this, it was now. And also at that time, so that was 2009, there were no female leads in network television, not on CBS. And so to me, it was a huge leap forward for women in my business. And I jumped at the chance to play her. The only caveat was that they told me it would have to shoot in LA because that's where the Kings lived and that's where the writer's room would be. And my baby was 13 months old and my husband has a job in New York. And I said, oh my God, I can't do it. I'm so sorry. I can't move to LA. I know well enough after ER that when you're on a series that's 1 hour long, it's not a few months of work. It's 10 months of work and you're not flying home on weekends. You're exhausted. So I said, as much as I'd love to, I can't do that to my family. And they miraculously said, then we'll move to New York. And that was the biggest gift they could have ever given me because it was 7 years of just an incredible experience and a character I still miss. I really miss her a lot. I loved her.
What's something about the character that you think, because I think you just had an opportunity to get to know her so well. You know what I mean? I read something that you described, like it took you months and months to just take that character off after you were finished. As you knew that character so well, is there anything about her you feel was overlooked that perhaps we didn't see in her?
Wow. Tom, that's a great question. I think there is an incredibly sexy side of Alicia Florrick that is dying to get out. And I think she had a little bit of that with Jason, her last boyfriend on the show. I do believe that if the show had kept going, if the Kings kept wanting to do the show for an 8th season, I do believe you would have seen a different side of Alicia that you got to see with with Will Gardner, Josh Charles's character, a little bit when you finally could see her just allow herself what she had always wanted, which was to be with him. There were a couple of love scenes there where I tried to show how happy and light she could be. Because I think that was, she grew up being the good girl. She was always the good girl. And what did that get her? Nothing. She had to start from scratch at 42, because her philandering husband. I find her so fascinating. And I think there are so many sides of her that we haven't seen. And I also think that she started grabbing at a little bit of the can't beat 'em, join 'em at the end where it didn't fit right on her. She was trying to, if you can't beat them, join them. So she was trying to be a little bit more like the Christine Baranski character in a weird way, and the Chris Noth character, Peter Florrick's character, in a weird way. But that's not who she is. And it would have been so. I was actually all ready to do an 8th season. It was in my contract, but the Kings they were done. Yeah. It's really hard to write 22 episodes of a great show. I mean, the writers get it the worst than the actors even, because they're just cranking them out all the time. And we get a 2-month hiatus. They get a 2-week hiatus. So it was too much after 7 years. And also I think it left on such a great note that we would have probably had to dilute it down and it wouldn't have been as impactful.
I love that. I love that answer. I love knowing that you see something in her that perhaps we didn't see. My guest is Julianna Margulies, the star of 2 of the most beloved TV shows to air in the last 30 years, ER and The Good Wife. She has a new memoir out called Sunshine Girl, covering the highs of her life and career. And I'll say some heavier stuff too. And one of the stories from the book has been getting a lot of coverage is an encounter you had with the actor Steven Seagal. You were up for his movie in 1991, Out for Justice. You ended up getting it. And he invites you into the hotel to talk about the script. Listen, only tell me what you want to tell me. And if you go, Tom, I don't really want to talk about this, that's super fine too. Would you be interested in telling the story of what happened?
Oh, sure. I mean, I'm more than happy to tell it. It's in the book,
Yeah.
so I don't mind talking about it. I tried to write it. Like, it's a very serious. He was a predator, Steven Seagal, who picked young, up and coming actresses who were desperate to get their SAG card and have an acting career. I was one of the lucky few who got out of there unscathed completely. And so I write about it because so many women have come forward. And what's interesting is, since the book has come out, I've received letters and emails from a lot of actresses who had the same experience. And he said the same lines: "I'm a healer. Let me look at your palms." So basically what happened was, I had a fourth callback for a movie called Out for Justice. And I was home late at night. The audition was the next day, and I was very excited. And the casting director called me and asked me to come to Steven's hotel room in Midtown Manhattan. I lived in Brooklyn, to run the scene with him, because he didn't have time, and he loved my audition tape and he wanted to meet me. And I said, "Oh, it's late. It's 10 o'clock. I don't take subways this late." And she said, "No, don't worry, take a car. We'll pay for the car. And I really think you're going to get this role." And I was so excited, 22 years old and just over the moon that I'm going to get a movie. I actually had never heard of Steven Seagal. I didn't go to see action movies like that. I just wasn't in my wheelhouse to go and do that. But once I got close to getting the part, I was like, this is it. This is when all you need is that SAG card, and then you can start working, because it's a catch-22 in our acting world, where if you don't have a SAG card, you can't work. But you can only work once you have your SAG card. So you can do one job without it,
Right.
and then you have to join the union.
And I
So
should say, for people listening to this, the SAG card is the Screen Actors Guild, the
right.
union. Yeah,
And
right. Yeah.
yeah, it's the union, and it gets you a health insurance and
Yeah.
everything about it. It's like your golden ticket
Right.
to your next job.
Okay.
So I went to the hotel room, and sure enough, there was the casting director wasn't there. It was a huge hotel suite. And when he said, "Go sit down on the couch," and he pointed to a specific place on the couch. And I sat down and jumped right back up, because there was something very hard underneath the cushion. And he said, oh, that's sorry, I must have left my gun there. And he took out from under the cushion this big black pistol. And immediately I started realizing, oh my God, I have been duped. I'm an idiot. I just came into a man's room, hotel room. No one knows where I am. It's now 11 o'clock at night. And I'm with a 6'4" action star, and he has a gun. And I had never seen a gun before in my life. I come from crunchy granola hippie parents. Guns were part, it's what policemen or army people had, not human beings, regular human beings, citizens. Anyway, my wheels started turning, and I realized I was in a very dangerous situation. And then he asked me to go into the bedroom because he was tired. And I thought, okay, how do I do this? Now, the backdrop of that is that I am a tough New Yorker. And my father, when I would visit him in the New York City, had always taught me where to kick a guy and how to run fast. And I was a track runner, so I knew I was a fast runner. I knew if I had to, we used to walk around New York City in those days with our keys in between each finger, like so if someone came up to you, you could just punch them and it was like a spiked ball.
Right.
And I lived in Brooklyn. So I was street smart. I wasn't stupid. But I realized I was in a really difficult situation. And he brought me into the bedroom, and he asked me if I would give him my palm. And he read my palm, and he told me he was a healer. And what's interesting about that is a lot of the letters I've been getting, they all say, oh my God, he used the same line on me, that he was a healer, blah, blah. Anyway, and he read my palm and he told me that I had weak kidneys, which at that point I actually found quite humorous, because I thought, does this work for you with women? Like, I have weak kidneys? No, I don't. And I sort of saw the ridiculousness of the situation. And also at that point, he had put the gun down on his nightstand. So I didn't feel immediately threatened by the gun. And then he asked to look at the other palm. And I just realized this was a shtick that was so ridiculous and stupid, and that I could outsmart him. And he looked at my other palm, and I jumped. I said, thank you so much. I'm going to look into the kidney situation, but I got to go. And I ran out of there. I ran fast. And this is where I got to the elevator and realized I had no money, and it was midnight, and there was no way you could take a subway home at midnight in New York City to Brooklyn. At that time, Brooklyn was not what it is now. And I went back to the room and knocked on the door. And I made sure to stand on the other side of the door, and I spoke very loudly so the room next to his could hear me. I spoke very loud. I used my theater voice, and I said, Pamela told me, the casting director, that you would give me money for a cab home, and you didn't reimburse me for the cab I took here. And he sort of laughed and handed me some cash. I didn't look. I took the cash and ran back to the elevator. My heart was pounding. And I looked in my palm as the elevator was going down, and it was $100 bill. And I thought, oh my God, I had never seen $100 bill. I mean, that's a lot of money in those days. And for a struggling actress. And I thought, if I just survived a 6'4" black belt in a hotel room alone without anyone knowing, I could survive a subway ride home at midnight and pay off my credit card bill, which is exactly what I did. And I still went to the audition the next day. And I got the part. And I had some shame about that. You know, I didn't.
Shame.
I had shame about the fact that I had gone to his hotel room. I felt so stupid, even though nothing had happened to me. I didn't tell anyone about it for a long, long time, because I didn't want anyone to think I got the part because I went to his hotel room. And then when I got the part and they flew me to LA, I just made sure to stay near everyone. I told the hair and makeup people, please don't leave me alone on set with him. I never want to be in a room alone with him. And I just followed the other actors out wherever I could, and I was never alone with him. And I got my SAG card.
I mean, thank you for telling the story.
Sure.
What does it mean that you've, or I can tell that it's meaningful to you that you've heard from other people?
Yeah. I think it validates a lot of women's feelings. When the Me Too movement happened and I was hearing all about it, I had mentioned it on a couple of shows because I was doing press for the Hot Zone, I think, at the time. But I think a lot of women, you feel so vulnerable, and the smartest of women will end up in these vulnerable situations, and you don't tell people because you don't want to seem stupid. How did that happen? And I told the story because I wanted to validate a lot of the stories I'd been hearing in print. I wanted to write it down, my experience, because my memoir is so truthful. The hardest thing about the memoir was being as honest as I am in it. There are things I never wanted to write about, but I realized it wouldn't have served the story's purpose without it. You know, I needed to write about a 10-year relationship, not to throw my ex-boyfriend under the bus, but to show that it was me. It was my actions, not his actions, that put me in that position. You know, I needed to show that I had to step away from that relationship in order to find myself again, because I lost myself. And a lot of people who have read the book have said to me, oh my God, I felt the same way. And it really helped to read someone who they think is smart, did the same thing. You know, we all need someone to relate to, I think, just in terms of being able to say, oh my God, I'm so glad that happened to her too, because I thought I was crazy. You know?
Yeah.
So I think with the Steven Seagal story, I think it really gave a lot of women just that sort of feeling of relief that their story was heard and that it is true.
And I should say, it's important that I say Steven Seagal has denied accusations of sexual misconduct and rape by multiple people, and he's still a working actor. You've run into him since, too.
Well, I ran into him when I was on. So one of the weird things he had said to me when he was reading my palm was, I saw your audition tape and you're very talented. And I want you to promise me when you win your Oscar that you won't thank me. And I thought that was odd. So I said, okay, I won't. And then, so I did the movie. It was 2 weeks and I was in LA for 2 weeks. And then that was it, the end of that. And then I got ER, I guess 3 years later, or two years later. And I was on the Warner Brother lot wearing my pink scrubs on a lunch break. And I was walking from my trailer to the commissary to go get my lunch. And I saw a huge trailer and it had a big posse outside. And there was Steven Seagal sitting in front of his trailer with his posse. And I had just won, 2 weeks prior, I had won the Emmy for Best Supporting Actress for ER. And I thought, oh, he'll never remember me. I mean, I was a bit part on a movie 3 years ago, whatever. He'll never remember me. So I just put my head down and kept walking, and he yelled out, Margulies, you didn't thank me. And I was so stunned that he even remembered who I was. And I turned to him and I said, well, it wasn't an Oscar. And I just kept walking. And that was that.
It's a, like I said, it's a book full of really incredible stories. And you dedicate this memoir to your parents. Your father died, as you mentioned, in 2014, and your mom is still with us, if I'm not mistaken, right?
She is indeed.
Has she read it?
So she has read it. I gave her the galley. Well, I was reading her chapters as I was writing them. If I was in New York City, she lives in the Berkshires. If I was in New York City, I'd read them to her over the phone. But over the pandemic, I was able to sit on her porch, and I read her pretty much the whole book in parts. And then I sent her the galley before it was printed out. And she called me and she said, I love it. I love it. It's beautiful.
Even though it's hard about her, like, even though.
Well, so, and then her next line was, and I am so sorry.
Really?
Now, that was her first reaction. Since then, she's read it quite, more. Now she has a hard copy and she's reading the final print. And here's the thing. I think what she loves about it, how do I say this in the nicest way possible? My mother is a narcissist, and the book is about her. So, and I write about how beautiful she is and how comforting she was to me, and how, even though she was nuts and complicated, and that she would laugh with me when I would bring stuff, the moments that are warm and sweet are the moments that I think she's taking with her. But the overall of the book is that the book doesn't happen without her. And for someone who is as deliciously narcissistic as she is, she's the star. Right? So
you can't beat that,
You can't. What's interesting is, when I was writing the book, I read a lot of books on memoir writing, and Mary Carr wrote a book on how to write a memoir. And the book is tattered. I read it so many times. But one of the things that she kept saying that I'd have to keep going back to her writing when I would get stuck was, just vomit it all out on the page. I can guarantee you, no matter what you write about people, they'll all feel so good that they're in your book. She had written a memoir about her childhood, thinking she was going to get tons of backlash, and everyone loved it. I think when you're the star of the book, and you have that big of an ego, it feels kind of good. And I do say it with love, because, and I write about my mother with love. I think, and especially as an adult now, I see she did the best she could. And some of it was really fantastic, and others of it was awful. But she's also only human, and she's asked for forgiveness, and I've absolutely given her that forgiveness, because I would rather have a relationship that is pure and loving than one where I'm harboring anger, because she gave me this life, and I really appreciate being alive.
It's been lovely to talk to you. Before we go, I wanted to ask one more question. So,
Yes.
Alicia Florrick, The Good Wife,
Mhm.
Carol Hathaway, ER, very memorable fans, very memorable characters. Fans are in love with both of them. Between the two, who has taught you the most about yourself?
Alicia. And that could be because I was older. I was in my 20s when I did Carol Hathaway, and I was 42 when I started Alicia Florrick's journey, and I was already a mother and a wife. And I think I was ready to learn. You know, when I was in my 20s, it was all about the excitement of playing the character. When I was in my 40s, it was about, oh, wow, I can relate to that. I understand it, and I know just how to play this. And there were moments about Alicia that I learned from in her silences, because I'm an actress, you know, I emote. It's just part of who I am. But Alicia doesn't. She's, I just called her Alicia in the present. Alicia didn't.
I love that you did. I love that you did. She's still there.
She is still there. I think she's still there. But I loved her silences. I loved how she really thought out her answers. It taught me to look at both sides of a coin before I respond. And I had never done that before. And that can be incredibly empowering. In a conversation, in a fight, in a business transaction, it's a good trait to have. And I also think I gave her some of Julianna's traits, which is what's so beautiful about acting on a television series. It's like a novel, you know, you keep getting to turn these pages and growing with the characters. You don't get to do that in film, because there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then that's it. But with television, and since, you know, what was that, 7 years we did that show, so 156 episodes. Mm-hmm. You know, and the Kings would say to me, oh, you did something as Julianna that we're now going to write into the thing, because it was perfect for Alicia. You know, so the writers, it's a dance you do with each other. And if you're lucky enough to get great writing, as I always have been, then you get to play that dance, and you get to create that character that ultimately becomes this huge epic novel of transformation.
It's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much.
You too, Tom.
Thanks for making the time.
Thanks for your great questions.
It's lovely to have you. Right. Julianna Margulies, her new book is called Sunshine Girl, and she joined me now.